Right.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about on your first hunt with that 7 mag Tasco scope, and that, you know, what you would feel comfortable, you know, distance wise. Your brother-in-law was reloading, you were reloading from the get-go, Ron's reloading,
Yeah.
working different loads, time's passing, which means, you know, technology, bullets that they're creating, okay, terminal, you know, ballistics on these bullets, how they act when they hit something now further, and kind of all of that. Tell us about kind of, I guess, getting into that, the long range, which back in the day, you tell us, right? What was that distance that was considered
300.
Oh, you're a long range shooter.
Oh,
you
300
know,
was 300 was almost an unbelievable shot to a certain extent. Again, there were still no rangefinders or anything, and so you're guesstimating. But by then I had decided that I really liked the 270 caliber, and I had worked up some loads with the 130 grain 270 bullets, and I remember Ron Buckner and I went down into the whetstones, and we backpacked in, and we're trying to get away from hunters and stuff, and we were down there, and I was committed to backpack in and stay, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and come home. But again, it was a challenge for your mother, my sweetheart. Now she's at home with probably 6 kids by now, whatever. Maybe it was still only 5.
Yeah.
5 little ones, and I'm going off, you know, having fun. You know, even though it was providing meat for the family, it was still hard for her, and rightfully so. You know, a challenge. But anyway, so we get there, we spend the night, we backpack in, we spend the night on this ridge, kind of in a saddle, you know, or whatever, and we wake up the next morning, it's opening day, and we glass up we glassed up a lot of deer. We glassed up a herd of 5 bucks across this canyon from us, and we basically glassed all day long from that spot, maybe walking down the ridge, looking over here, looking behind us or whatever, and those deer stayed there all day. And
do you remember what year this was?
Golly, I don't.
Or even a time frame? I mean, is this late 80s, early 90s, or is this by now, you know, mid 90s, late 90s?
I'm gonna guess late 90s. Maybe earlier than that. I'm not sure.
Are you glassing off tripods yet?
We are glassing off tripods. We have backpacks. Like I said, we packed in there.
Yeah.
But we watch these deer, and they're across the canyon from us, and I decide, I tell Ron, I said, you know what, I think I'm going to shoot one of these bucks. It's 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon now, and we've been, you know, we keep going, we're glassing, and we go over there, and oh yeah, they're still there, you know, whatever. And the biggest one, I think Ron had a Bushnell spotting scope, and Bushnell was the other brand of scope I was trying to think of.
That's right.
And he had a Bushnell spotting scope by now. If he sees this, he's going to laugh.
We have to send it to him.
He was rich. Anyway, he had a Bushnell spotting scope, and he was looking at those bucks, and one of them over there was, you know, he had a pretty good beam, and he was actually starting to grow a 4th point out on his beams, which, you know, that was a big, you know, in my world, that was a big buck.
Well, and with Coues deer, you don't see that often.
No.
If you can get into an area where the genetics and whatever, and a buck can get old enough, you'll see genetic traits, right, of these deer. But so yeah, I mean, you're used to seeing maybe 3x3s with eye guards, and then this buck not only has that, but is starting to grow a fourth point. Yeah,
starting to grow a fourth point. Anyway, so I said, "How far do you think that is?" And he says, "Oh, I think it's about 300." And I said, "Okay." So the ballistics and the bullet drop and compensation for that. We had shot I'd shot my bullets through chronograph. I knew how fast they were going, and you could go look at. They did have in the back of the Sierra reloading manual. They did have
drop charts,
some tables that you could look at, and so and I had been zeroing my rifle at 300 yards. So because if it's 100 yards, okay, you're going to hit 3.5 inches high. So you're still in the pocket. You're still in the right spot.
Right.
If it's 200 yards, you're going to hit closer to where your crosshairs are.
Right.
At 300 yards, you're hitting
That's your
dead
zero.
on.
Right.
And all the way out to 340 yards,
Right.
So that just made a lot of sense to me and Ron and I. And so I said, I'm going to try to get closer. And the only way to get closer was to just kind of go down the ridge, which got me a little closer, but now I'm on the side of the ridge that's very steep, and I'm trying to figure out, oh, well, man, this ain't a very good idea. How am I going to, there's no place to set up. There's no rocky outcropping or whatever. So literally, I laid parallel with the ridge.
Okay.
The ridge is going down this way, and I literally laid on my side parallel, and I had my pack underneath me, and I might even have had a tripod or bipod by then. I'm not sure. And literally, so now I'm laying.
The gun's perpendicular to you.
Yeah, the gun is on a 90-degree angle from me now.
Yeah.
I'm laying on my side, on the side of the hill. The gun's this way and pointed up there. And Ron's on the spotting scope, watching to call the shot. And this buck is there. He's broadside, and
So you had decided 300 yards.
300 yards.
I'm gonna put it.
I'm gonna
dead
put
nuts.
it. I'm gonna
and
put
I'm
it
gonna
right on
shoot this buck.
right on him, and I'm gonna shoot this buck. So you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. And I squeeze it off, and nothing. And the deer just kind of look around. There's 5 of them over there, and they're just kind of looking around like, what was that, or whatever. And I said, where'd I hit? And he goes, man, I couldn't tell. And I said, you didn't see any dust or anything? And he goes, no. And I said, okay, I'm going to aim higher. I think it's farther.
Yeah.
And so I pulled my crosshairs all the way to the top of his back.
Okay. So we're holding 5-6 inches
6
high
inches
from
high
the center
from the
of
center.
his,
Yeah. And I squeeze it off, and boom, I hit underneath him. And he goes, you hit underneath him. I was right on line with where I needed to be aiming.
Windage was good.
Windage was good, but I hit underneath him. And so, I crank another one in, and the deer kind of just didn't even do anything then either, second shot, hit underneath him, and he goes, you're low. And so I raise up about 12 inches over his, between, how do you judge that? You're
Right.
looking through a scope, and there's the crosshairs, and you see the deer. Clearly he's farther than 300
Right.
yards, so it's a long ways you're looking. I'm going to say I was probably 1.5 feet over his
About
back.
18 inches over
About
his
18
back.
inches over his back. And I
More than double his body.
Yes.
From his back to his belly. More than that over
and
his
I
back.
squeezed that third shot off, and he jumps in the air and kind of walks forward about 10 steps and still stand there broadside. And he goes, you clipped his brisket. You clipped him right on the brisket. So I've got one more shell. I mean, I've got more bullets,
Right.
but how long is he going to stand there for
Right.
this stuff, So I cranked the fourth one in, and I'm holding now what I'm estimating to be about 30 inches over his back. And I squeeze it off and center punch that buck and drop him in his tracks. And Ron's just going, how far was that? How far was that? And I said, well, from what I know about my bullet,
the drop charts.
It's just in my mind. We didn't even write it on a card and tape it to our gun. You just memorized it, you know. I said, that's about 500 yards, probably between 500 and 525 yards. and we were just going, holy crap, that was a long shot, you know, or whatever. And Ron, being who he is, you know, he's thinking, dadgum, if Oregon can do that, I can do that, you know, or whatever. Anyway, we went over there and got that deer and you know, took care of it or whatever.
What kind of buck was he, size-wise? Was that one of your bigger bucks at that point?
It was the biggest I'd shot at that time, I believe. I don't know. I think he's like 87.
Okay.
He's
so
scored about 87, pushing 90, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
If I remember right. But a beautiful buck.
Yeah.
Beautiful buck. And yeah, so the next year we ended up going to a different unit, and Ron had a custom rifle made, and I can't even remember what it was. Some Wildcat thing.
Yeah.
And he ended up shooting this buck. It was a long ways away.
Further than your buck?
Well, we don't really know.
Right.
Guessing that it might have been closer to 600 yards. But, and that wasn't, you know, he got it done, you know. But, yeah, and that just kind of started it, I guess. And then it just started, it just kind of went from there. And, of course, technology, obviously, we weren't the only ones doing that.
Right.
But it wasn't very long after that a 300-yard shot was just a chip shot, you know, 500 and 600 yards.
Becoming a lot more common.
Yeah.
You're hearing people talk about it more. You're hearing people, I killed a buck at this far.
And then, of course, the naysayers and the do-gooders and everything were, you know, that was quite a controversy.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're just wounding you're going to wound the animal and it's going to get away. Ethical shots
versus,
and, you know, you're not even hunting, you know, you're just finding it and then just killing it at whatever distance, you know, whatever. And, you know, that became a hot topic.
Still is.
And it still is. It still is. But,
well, what are your thoughts on that?
well, you know, you four boys grew up shooting and hunting, and I can remember your little brother, Aaron. He was the last one. He's the last one going through the hunter safety course. He's 10 years old. He's a skinny little 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And he had graduated from the 243 that I had, and he actually shot my 270 better than he shot the 243. A lot more recoil.
Right.
There was no such thing as a muzzle brake back then.
Well, probably was, but...
Well, I'm not sure back then, but there might have been.
Yeah.
But
you didn't have one.
And he was deadly out to 400 yards.
Yeah.
10 years old.
Consistent. Yeah.
Consistent, yes.
No problem. Yeah.
This isn't a Hail Mary and,
No
I got lucky, I hit it.
No ethic issue.
No.
If we have the time and we can get set up.
And
very
that's our
doable.
only option.
Right.
You know, that's our only option. We can't get any closer. And the conditions are right.
Right.
He was confident in taking that shot. And I remember in the Arizona Game Fish Department youth educational, you know.
Yeah, the hunter safety course.
Hunter safety
You got to
course.
take it and pass a test to be able to hunt before you're 14.
trying hard to be nice about this poor guy. He's a volunteer, you know, all of it was volunteer. But he, you know, he asked the question, what's an ethical shot? What distance is an ethical shot? Of course, Aaron, he's all excited. He throws his hand up, you know, and the guy calls on him and he says, 400 yards. And the guy goes, oh no, don't ever try that. And Aaron looks at me with these big eyes like, did I say something wrong? You know, or whatever. And I said, son, it's okay. It's all right, you know, or whatever. And we talked about it afterwards, and I, you know, forgive me, but this volunteer, you know, he talked about how he'd been javelina hunt for, I think it was 13 years before he finally shot his first javelina, and with a rifle, and he just wasn't much of a hunter, and that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. And I told Aaron, I said, son, 100-yard shot is a long shot for that guy. He just, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I said, but for you, you've been shooting since you were 5 years old, right. And 400 yards
is good.
Is a good shot for you. Yeah. And you just got to know that that's just the way it is.
And in reality, you know, if you could, I mean, we could just look at our experience, right? You, the two of us that have hunted more, you know, two of my brothers, they've hunted but don't do it a lot as much, right. Whatever. But just look at so there's three of us. Just look at our experience. But then if you would talk to Ron, and you would talk to David, and you would talk to, and then even expand it to other people that you know that have hunted Coues deer for a long time. And if you said, okay, of all these years and all your hunts and all your shots and all the times you've spotted deer and on and on and on, and try to find an average of like, what would be the average shot distance? I think somewhere in that 400-yard range would be a close number. It wouldn't be 125 and it wouldn't be 1,000. It would be somewhere in the middle because of where they live, the big open canyons, big open country. And I'm sure there's people that'll watch this and say, well, sure, I spotted it at 400 or 500 yards, but then I did. I don't know why you can't. I killed it at 118 yards. And good for you. You know, the times that we have gotten closer lots of times and made closer shots, made better shots, you know, all those things. But sometimes it's just not. And guys will say, well, there's always an option. Well, we're running out of daylight, come back in the morning. Well then, you know, and so we look at it as kind of a totality of circumstances of how much time do I have to hunt? How much time do I have off work? When do I want to be respectful to my wife and kids and come back? When do, you know, tomorrow might not be an option, you know, but I have this tool and I know through my practice and through, you know, everything I've done to prepare for this, I can make this 485-yard shot or even longer. I can make this right. Longer shot and not guarantee necessarily, but the odds are very possible that I can harvest this deer versus not. And so using it as a tool versus, you know, it's not like we've ever, and I don't think anyone that's killed deer at longer distances would say, oh yeah, I spotted such and such an animal. It was only 500 yards, and so I backed up 400 yards right. And shot it at 900. Yeah. No, it's a tool that if you are prepared to use it, and if you use it as a tool, then you have that, you know, in your toolbox, and it's there for you.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest challenges in the industry as spotting scopes and binoculars and tripods and rifle scopes and range finders and all these things, technology that came along in the industry. I'm just going to say it. I you know, it's nothing to go out and buy a rifle scope that you know, has turrets on it and you can dial it up and And these, I'm trying not to paint with a broad brush, but unfortunately, there are individuals getting into hunting for the first time, or maybe they've been in hunting for a while, or whatever. They go buy this equipment, and they're not really serious about it.
But it's turnkey. It's
But
this setup.
It's this setup, and you get this setup, and now you're a long-range shooter or
Well,
whatever.
Yeah, what do I have to practice for? If I just turn it to the number, I'll shoot the deer.
I'm good, and you and I know, and anybody who uses this as a tool understands completely that nothing could be farther from the truth.
Yeah.
You will hopefully you'll completely miss the animal, and it will be fine and live on. But at the very worst, they get wounded,
Right.
And then they're unfortunately maybe or maybe not in shape or not, and that's a heck of a canyon I got to
Right.
cross and
Right.
go over there and or whatever,
and then find it, all those things. Well, and then we even talked about just a couple of the other elements that would be involved with, besides just pressing the trigger, right? You talked about adrenaline on that first javelina hunt, right? People say buck fever and these different terms, right? But
it's real.
these adrenaline dumps, and maybe another episode, another show, we can get into the science of it, right? I went to school for some of that stuff, and then in my old job experienced it a lot. But if you don't experience those adrenaline dumps often, then when you do experience it, you don't know what the heck's going on. I've seen videos where guys and temperature and weather is part of it as well. But I've seen hunting videos and shows that I enjoyed watching, but either before the shot or after the shot, they've made comments about, why am I so cold? I'm freezing. I can't stop from shaking. And it's not because you're cold at all. You're wearing $400 worth of warm clothes.
Yeah.
You just had an adrenaline dump, and your body, what's coursing through your blood right now, you just aren't used to that.
Right.
So there's that. There's, hey, I had to lay sideways on this hill, perpendicular to my gun, which is honestly, even if you're prone, the worst way to lay, on and on and on. Then you have wind, you have elevation, you have weather, you have, the state of what you think the state is as far as the mindset of the deer. Are they spooked? Are they on high alert? Are they bedded? Are they not bedded? And on and on and on. And so, yeah, like you said, they have this turnkey setup. I'm good out to 1,000 yards now, and I don't need to practice. I don't need to do anything.
Let's face it, ammunition is not cheap.
Sure.
And they don't reload, so they go buy 2 boxes of shells, and they've just dropped, $100 or $120 or whatever for 2 boxes of shells.
Right. They got 40 rounds now.
They got 40 rounds. They go to the rifle range, and they sight their rifle in, zero it or whatever, and if you're lucky, they go through a box of shells doing that, and then they say, I'm good.
Yeah, because the rest of the work's done here on my dial.
That's all I got to do. And so you and I and anybody out there that watches this and sees this knows that there's way more to it than that. Lots and lots of trigger time.
Well, that's the other thing.
Is that about?
No, we're good for a few more minutes. That's the other thing, trigger time, right? And so at those distances, and we can get into it in a different video maybe, but that's another element. Anything
Probably one of the most critical
anything
elements.
that you input into the rifle, the stock's touching your shoulder, it's tucked into your pocket. That's a point of contact. Whether your forearm or not is on that forefront of the gun or the rifle, or you're holding the bipod, or you're on top of the barrel or on top of the scope, or you're not touching that, and you have pressure on the bag back here, and you have to squeeze it. Well, guess what? If you don't maintain that exact pressure as you press the trigger and you let go, even though it's fractions of a second,
that's all it takes.
The primer, ignition, explosion, boom, bullets leaving the barrel. This squeeze, all that stuff. So the inputs and outputs into the rifle, including this.
Well, that's probably one of the most critical is pressing in relationship to pulling.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about, I pulled the trigger. Well, hopefully you didn't pull the trigger. Hopefully you pressed it.
Or even squeezing. right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we used to hear you taught us even squeeze, and the principle of the word, right? Like constant pressure, right? Like a squeeze. But then if you think of that and say, if you tell somebody, hey, squeeze this ball, there's going to be a curve. There's going to be movement. So even on that trigger, right? Even if you're not thinking about it, it's a subconscious. You just told your brain, squeeze the trigger. It's going to be more of a squeeze than a pressing it straight back.
Straight back.
Right? And so
that you don't,
yep.
the gun goes this way or this way or
and then
whatever.
technology, right? Bubble levels and stuff, making sure, all of that stuff. And so, again, you get into ethics of it. You get into the technology versus your ability. How much have you practiced? All that stuff, right?
Well, and another aspect of it that didn't get touched on is your breathing.
Right.
You've got to, if you're not breathing right and you don't press the trigger at the right time,
right.
That can affect it.
That's
and so
input,
there's a lot.
yeah.
There is a lot to it that when you're talking about distances, we could even say at 300 yards.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's not for a lot of people, that could be a really, really long shot. But once you get these techniques and they become, they're embedded in you and they're part of you, and you're in the moment, but you're thinking it through and so on. And yes, you can be excited. Listen, I still get,
which is good.
yeah. So there's just so much to it, and it's an unfortunate thing in the industry today, and it's going into archery as well. For heaven's sakes, a 100-yard shot with a bow, just not too long ago, was just holy cow. You just don't do that.
Yeah.
You just don't do that.
Now guys are doing it routinely.
They're doing 3-inch and smaller groups at 100 yards,
Yeah.
because of the technology and so on.
And their ability and
their ability. But you can have all the technology in the world, but if you skip trigger time and practice and all those things that we talked about, you're going to be disappointed, and you may end up wounding something.
So I think now,
till he taught her how to shoot. Daddy didn't play no games, wouldn't let her trade her name for a fake ID.